My son called me financially illiterate, so I showed him the trust fund documents. The insult that sparked everything. The evening started like any other. The dining table was set neatly, just the way Evelyn Carter always liked it. Plates aligned. Glasses polished. Everything in its place. It was one of the few routines she never abandoned, even after life had changed so much. Daniel sat across from her, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. The soft glow from the screen reflected in his eyes, distant, distracted, disconnected. "Daniel," Evelyn said gently, "can you put the phone away while we eat?" He sighed, slow and exaggerated, like she had asked him for something unreasonable. "I'm busy, Mom. This is important." Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She had learned that silence often said more than words. But tonight felt different. There was a tension in the air, something building beneath the surface. "Important?" she asked calmly. "More important than sitting with your mother for one meal." Daniel finally looked up, a small smirk forming on his face. "This is how business works, Mom. You wouldn't really understand." There it was. Not loud. Not explosive. But sharp enough to cut. Evelyn held his gaze. "Help me understand, then." Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. His tone shifted, less respectful, more condescending. "It's just, you've never really been involved in money decisions. You've always been comfortable staying out of it." Evelyn felt the words land, one by one. Calm on the outside. But inside, something stirred. "I stayed out of it," she said slowly, "because I trusted your father." Daniel let out a short laugh. "Exactly." That one word carried more weight than it should have. Exactly. As if that explained everything. As if that proved his point. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. "And what is your point, Daniel?" He didn't hesitate this time. "My point is, you're financially illiterate, Mom." The room went completely still. Even the faint sounds from outside, the passing cars, the distant voices, seemed to disappear. Evelyn blinked once. Not out of confusion, but to steady herself. "Financially illiterate," she repeated softly. Daniel shrugged, like it was obvious. "I don't mean it in a bad way," he added quickly, though his tone didn't match his words. "It's just reality. You don't understand investments, assets, or how money actually grows." Evelyn studied him carefully. This wasn't just a careless comment. This was something deeper. Something he believed. "You think I don't understand money," she said. "I know you don't," Daniel replied. "And honestly, it's risky. You shouldn't be making decisions about anything financial." "That's my job now." There it was again. Not just disrespect. Control. Evelyn leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. "When did that become your job?" she asked. Daniel leaned forward now, more confident, more assertive. "Since Dad passed. Someone has to take charge. And with all due respect, it can't be you." All due respect. The phrase sounded polite. But it carried none. Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Not anger. Not yet. But awareness. This wasn't just a disagreement about money. This was family betrayal. Her own son had reduced her to someone incapable. Someone irrelevant. And the most painful part? He truly believed it. "Daniel," she said quietly, "do you think I've just been sitting here all these years? Not paying attention?" He hesitated for a second. Just a second. But then his confidence returned. "Yes." The word landed harder than anything else he had said. No hesitation. No doubt. Just certainty. Evelyn nodded slowly, as if accepting his answer. "I see." Daniel relaxed, thinking the conversation was over. Thinking he had made his point. But Evelyn wasn't finished. You believe I'm financially illiterate, she continued. That I don't understand money, decisions, or responsibility. Daniel shrugged again. That's not an insult. It's just facts. Facts. Evelyn almost smiled. Almost. Interesting, she said. There was something in her voice now. Subtle, but different. Daniel didn't notice it. But it was there. A quiet shift. A quiet decision. From now on, Evelyn added, you should be very careful about what you assume. Daniel frowned slightly. What does that mean? Evelyn stood up slowly, collecting her plate. It means, she said calmly, that not everything is as simple as it looks. Daniel watched her, confused. For the first time that evening, he wasn't completely sure of himself. But he brushed it off quickly. Mom, I'm just trying to help, he said. You need to trust me on this. Evelyn paused, then looked at him one last time. I trusted you, she said quietly. And then she walked away. Daniel sat there, staring at the empty space she left behind. He thought he had won the argument. He thought he had taken control. What he didn't realize was that something had just begun. Something bigger than a simple disagreement. Something that would challenge everything he believed. Because Evelyn Carter wasn't what he thought she was. Not even close. And very soon, he was going to find out just how wrong he had been. White right pointing backhand index. If this moment caught your attention, you already know this story is about to get intense. Hit that subscribe button, because you don't want to miss what happens next. Drop a like, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments. Where are you watching from? The Hidden Life He Never Saw, Hidden Wealth Inheritance Drama. The house was quiet the next morning, but it was not the kind of quiet that felt empty. It was the kind of quiet that carried something underneath it, something building, something waiting. Evelyn Carter stood by the window, watching Daniel's car disappear down the street. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't look back. To him, nothing had changed. But to Evelyn, everything had. The words from the night before still echoed in her mind. Financially illiterate. She repeated them slowly, not with pain, but with clarity. That single sentence had revealed more than Daniel ever intended. It showed what he believed. It showed how little he understood. And most importantly, it showed how deeply he had underestimated her. Evelyn turned away from the window and walked down the hallway toward a door that had remained closed for weeks. Richard's study. She paused for a moment, her hand resting on the handle. This room was not just a place. It was memory, discipline, and truth. Then she opened it. The air inside felt untouched, as if time had stopped out of respect. Everything was exactly where it should be. Files aligned. Desk clean. Shelves organized. Richard Carter had never been careless, not in life, and certainly not in death. Evelyn stepped inside slowly, her eyes scanning the room with quiet understanding. Daniel had been in here before. He believed he had gone through everything. He believed he had taken control. But Daniel had only seen what was meant to be seen. He had no idea there was more. Evelyn walked to the desk and opened the top drawer. Inside were documents Daniel had already reviewed, or at least he thought he had. She moved past them without interest. That was surface-level information. Basic accounts. Standard assets. Predictable structures. That was the version of the truth Daniel was allowed to see. But Richard never built anything without layers. Evelyn reached deeper into the drawer and pulled out a thin folder hidden beneath the rest. It was simple, almost easy to overlook. On the front, one word was written, private. Beneath it, her name. Not Daniel's. Hers. Evelyn opened it slowly. Inside were documents that told a completely different story. Accounts that didn't appear anywhere else. Investments that were never discussed openly. Assets placed carefully, intentionally, out of sight. This was not just money. This was hidden wealth. And it had never been meant for careless hands. Evelyn flipped through the pages, her expression calm, her movement steady. There was no confusion in her eyes. No hesitation. Every number made sense. Every decision was familiar. Because she had been there when these plans were made. Not speaking loudly. Not taking control. But listening, learning, understanding. She had asked the questions that mattered. She had seen the risks before they became problems. She had understood the long game while others focused on the present. Daniel thought she had been sitting in the background doing nothing. But the truth was, she had been absorbing everything. She turned to the next page and found a letter. Richard's handwriting. Strong, clear, unmistakable. Evelyn paused before reading it, then took a slow breath. Evelyn, she read quietly, if you are reading this, it means the time has come. Her chest tightened slightly, but her hands remained steady. You have always understood more than you showed. That was your strength. Now it must become your voice. Evelyn closed her eyes for a brief second. Richard had known. Not exactly what would happen, but he understood people. He understood patterns. He understood that one day, someone would mistake silence for weakness. She continued reading. Daniel will believe he is ready. Confidence will guide him, but not wisdom. That is where you come in. Evelyn exhaled slowly and placed the letter down. The room felt different now. Not heavy, not emotional, but clear. Focused. This was not just about money anymore. This was inheritance drama, but not the kind filled with shouting and chaos. This was quiet power. Structured control. A truth waiting to be revealed at the right moment. Evelyn stood up and walked toward the bookshelf. She reached for another file, one thicker than the rest. This one was not hidden. It was placed in plain sight, but only meaningful to someone who knew what to look for. At the top, it read, Trust Structure Overview. Evelyn's fingers rested on the cover. So this is how you protected everything, she said softly. She opened it and began to read. The deeper she went, the clearer it became. Everything connected. Every hidden account, every investment, every decision, it all led here. A system designed not just to hold wealth, but to control it. To protect it. To guide it. And at the center of it all was one name. Evelyn Carter. Not as a bystander. Not as a placeholder. But as the one in charge. Daniel had no idea. He thought he was managing everything. He thought he had stepped into his father's role. But he had only been standing on the surface of something far greater. Evelyn closed the file gently and looked around the room one last time. This was no longer a place of memory. It was a place of action. She walked back to the desk and picked up her phone. There was no hesitation in her movement now. No uncertainty. She dialed a number she hadn't called in a while. The line rang once, then twice. Leonard Hayes speaking. Evelyn's voice was calm, steady, and clear. Leonard, it's Evelyn Carter. A brief pause followed, then recognition. Mrs. Carter. It's time, she said. Silence on the other end, but not confusion. Understanding. I'll prepare everything, he replied. Evelyn nodded slightly. Thank you. She ended the call and placed the phone down. The room fell silent again, but this silence was no longer passive. It was deliberate. Controlled. Powerful. Evelyn glanced at the folder one last time, then whispered, financially illiterate. This time, there was no weight to the words. Only quiet certainty. Because very soon, Daniel was going to face a truth he never saw coming. And when he did, everything he believed about his mother would collapse in a single moment. The trust fund revelation, trust fund shocking truth. The message came early, and it was different from anything Daniel was used to. Be ready by 10 a.m. We have a meeting. No greeting. No explanation. No room for questions. Daniel stared at the screen, confused for a moment, then slightly annoyed. His mother didn't speak like that. She usually softened things, explained things, stayed careful with her words. But this message felt direct, almost firm. He typed back quickly, asking what the meeting was about, but the reply came short and cold. "You'll see." That irritated him more than it should have. Still, he wasn't worried. In his mind, this was probably about money. Maybe she finally realized she needed his help. Maybe she was ready to accept that he was the one in control now. That thought settled his ego. By the time they arrived at the office building, Daniel had already convinced himself this meeting would confirm everything he believed. He stepped out of the car with confidence, adjusting his suit, walking beside Evelyn like someone who owned the situation. Then he looked up and read the name on the building. Hayes and Associates. His steps slowed slightly. "Why are we here?" he asked. Evelyn didn't answer. She simply walked ahead, calm and composed. That silence again. It bothered him now. Inside, everything felt precise. Clean floors, quiet voices, controlled energy. The kind of place where nothing happened by accident. They were led into a private office, and a man stood up to greet them. "Mrs. Carter," he said politely. "Leonard," Evelyn replied. Daniel stepped forward and introduced himself, firm handshake, confident tone. "Daniel Carter." "Mr. Carter," Leonard said calmly. They sat down, and Daniel crossed his legs, leaning back slightly like he belonged there. "So," he said, "what's this about?" Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, Leonard opened a file and placed a stack of documents neatly on the desk. "We'll begin here," he said. Daniel barely looked interested at first, but then his eyes caught something. His name. He leaned forward, picking up the first page, scanning quickly. His expression shifted. "What is this?" he asked. Leonard folded his hands calmly. "This is a trust fund established by your father." Daniel blinked once, then frowned. "I've already reviewed all the accounts," he said. "I know what's there." Leonard's voice stayed steady. "This is not part of what you reviewed." That made Daniel pause. Really pause. He looked down again, this time slower, more focused. Numbers filled the pages. Large numbers. Structures he didn't recognize. Terms he hadn't seen before. His confidence started to crack, just slightly. "This doesn't make sense," he said. "I went through everything. This wasn't included." Leonard nodded. "That is correct." Daniel looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" Evelyn's voice entered the room quietly, but it carried weight. "It means you didn't see everything." Daniel turned to her, confusion building fast. "What is this, Mom?" Evelyn held his gaze. Calm. Steady. Unshaken. "It's the truth." Leonard slid another document toward him. "This trust fund contains a significant portion of your father's wealth," he explained. "It was structured separately with specific control conditions." Daniel flipped through the pages faster now, his breathing slightly heavier. "This is a lot of money," he muttered. Then he stopped. His eyes froze on one section. Control authority. He read it again. His face changed completely. "No," he said under his breath. "That's not right." He looked up, his confidence slipping away. "Who controls this?" Leonard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced at Evelyn. And that was all the answer Daniel needed. He turned slowly. "Mom?" Evelyn didn't move. "I do," she said. The words hit harder than anything else. Daniel stared at her, his mind trying to catch up. "You," he said. "That doesn't make sense. Why would he put you in charge?" Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "Because he trusted me." Silence filled the room instantly. Daniel looked back at the papers, then at her again. I've been handling everything, he said. I've been making decisions. I thought, he stopped. Because now, it sounded foolish. Leonard spoke gently. You've been managing visible assets. This structure was designed differently. Differently how? Daniel asked, his voice sharper now. Evelyn leaned forward slightly. Carefully, she said. That word landed deep. Daniel leaned back, running his hand through his hair, frustration rising. So there's a whole trust fund, and you never told me. Evelyn didn't react to his tone. It wasn't time. Not time, he repeated. I'm your son. Evelyn nodded slowly. And that's exactly why it had to be structured this way. Daniel shook his head, disbelief written all over his face. I don't understand this. Evelyn looked at him with quiet clarity. That's because you never asked. He froze. The words from that night came back to him, clear and sharp. Financially illiterate. Now they sounded different. Weak. Careless. Dangerous. I didn't know, he said quietly. Evelyn nodded. No, you didn't. The room fell silent again, but this silence was heavy. Real. Unavoidable. Daniel looked down at the documents in his hands, his confidence completely gone now. This was the shocking truth. Everything he believed about control, about understanding, about his mother, was wrong. Completely wrong. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel Carter had nothing to say. The power shift, he underestimated me. The room did not change, but everything inside it did. Daniel sat still, the documents resting in his hands, yet they felt heavier than anything he had ever held before. Just minutes ago, he had walked in with confidence, with control, with the belief that he understood everything. Now, that belief was gone. Replaced by something unfamiliar. Uncertainty. He looked down at the pages again, hoping he had misunderstood, hoping there was still something he could hold on to, but the words did not change. The structure was clear. The authority was clear. The truth was clear. This was not his. It had never been his. And the person in control, the person he had dismissed so easily, was sitting right across from him. Evelyn Carter remained calm, her posture relaxed, her expression steady. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She didn't need to. The proof was already in his hands. Daniel swallowed slowly, his voice no longer carrying the same strength. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. It wasn't a demand this time. It was a question, almost quiet. Evelyn looked at him carefully before answering. Because you never asked the right questions. Daniel blinked. That answer hit deeper than he expected. He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Because somewhere inside, he knew it was true. He had assumed. He had decided what was real without checking. He had looked at his mother and concluded she was less capable, less informed, less important. And now, that assumption was collapsing right in front of him. I thought, he started, but the words faded. Evelyn finished it for him. You thought you were the one in control. Daniel looked away for a moment, unable to hold her gaze. The confidence he carried into that room had disappeared completely. In its place was something else. Realization. He underestimated me. The thought formed quietly in his mind, but it echoed loudly. Evelyn didn't rush the moment. She let the silence do its work. Because silence, when placed at the right time, forces truth to surface. Daniel finally looked back at her, his expression softer now, less defensive. I didn't see any of this, he admitted. Evelyn nodded slightly. That's because you were only looking at what was in front of you. Daniel frowned. What does that mean? Evelyn leaned forward just a little, her voice still calm, but firmer now. It means you focused on what you could control immediately. You didn't think about what could exist beyond that. Daniel exhaled slowly. Every word she spoke felt like a mirror, showing him something he had refused to see before. He said, glancing at the documents, "You've been managing everything." Evelyn didn't hesitate. Yes. The simplicity of her answer made it even more powerful. No explanation. No defense. Just truth. Daniel let out a quiet breath, shaking his head slightly. "I really thought," he paused again, then forced the words out, "I thought you didn't understand any of this." Evelyn's eyes held his, steady and unshaken. "I know." There was no anger in her voice. No frustration. Just acknowledgement. And somehow, that made it harder for Daniel to respond. Because anger would have been easier to face. This calm truth was not. "I called you financially illiterate," he said quietly. The words felt heavier now than they had the night before. Evelyn didn't look away. "Yes, you did." Daniel nodded slowly, regret beginning to show in his expression. "I was wrong." The admission hung in the air. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. Evelyn studied him for a moment, then spoke. "You weren't just wrong, Daniel. You were confident in something you didn't understand." That sentence landed deeper than anything else. Daniel looked down again, his grip on the papers loosening. The power shift had already happened. Not through force. Not through argument. But through truth. He had walked into that room believing he was in charge. Now he sat there realizing he never was. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice quieter than before. Evelyn leaned back slightly, her composure unchanged. "Now," she said, "you learn." Daniel looked up, surprised. "Learn?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes. Because control without understanding leads to mistakes. And I won't allow that." Daniel absorbed her words slowly. This wasn't punishment. This wasn't revenge. This was something else. Something stronger. Guidance. But on her terms. "And the trust?" he asked. Evelyn's gaze remained steady. "The trust stays exactly where it is." Daniel nodded, accepting it this time. No argument. No resistance. Because he understood now. At least, he was starting to. "I really thought I had everything figured out," he admitted. Evelyn gave a small, almost knowing nod. Most people do, until they realize they don't. A quiet silence filled the room again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was clear. Balanced. Final. Daniel looked at his mother differently now. Not as someone to guide, or control, or correct. But as someone he had failed to truly see. Someone he had underestimated completely. He underestimated me. This time, the thought carried weight. Respect. Truth. And as he sat there, holding the evidence of everything he had missed, Daniel Carter understood one thing with absolute certainty. The power had never been his. It had always been hers. The lesson he'll never forget, karma respect lesson. The drive home was silent, but it was not the same silence as before. This one was heavier, filled with thoughts that could no longer be ignored. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window, but he wasn't really seeing anything. His mind kept replaying the moment in the office. The documents. The signatures. The truth. That trust fund had changed everything. Not just about money, but about how wrong he had been. Evelyn drove calmly, her eyes on the road, her hands steady on the wheel. She didn't rush to speak. She didn't need to. Some lessons are stronger when they are allowed to settle. When they are felt, not explained. Daniel finally broke the silence. "I didn't know," he said quietly. His voice carried something new. Not confidence. Not control. Something closer to humility. Evelyn nodded slightly. "No, you didn't." There was no anger in her tone. No need to remind him of his mistake. The truth had already done that. Daniel swallowed, his hands resting loosely in his lap. I thought I understood everything, he added. Evelyn glanced at him briefly, then back at the road. That's how most mistakes begin, she said. With certainty. Daniel let those words sink in. He remembered how sure he had been. How easily he had said it. Financially illiterate. Now the words felt heavy, almost embarrassing. He shifted slightly in his seat. I shouldn't have said that, he admitted. Evelyn didn't respond immediately. She let the moment breathe. Then she spoke, her voice calm but firm. No, you shouldn't have. Daniel nodded slowly. There was no defense left in him. No excuse. Just truth. I disrespected you, he said. This time, the words were clear. Direct. Honest. Evelyn finally looked at him fully, her expression steady. Yes, you did. Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment. I'm sorry, Mom. The apology was simple, but real. Not forced. Not rushed. It came from understanding. From realization. From the moment everything shifted. Evelyn watched him carefully, then spoke. An apology is a start, she said. But respect is something you show, not something you say. Daniel nodded again, absorbing every word. This wasn't about punishment. This was about a respect lesson he could not avoid. They arrived home, and the car came to a slow stop. Neither of them moved right away. The silence returned, but this time it felt different. Balanced. Clear. Daniel turned toward her. What happens now? He asked. Evelyn took a slow breath before answering. Now, you learn the difference between confidence and understanding. Daniel listened closely. And the trust fund? He asked. Evelyn's voice remained steady. The trust fund stays where it is. Under my control. Daniel didn't argue. Not this time. He nodded. Because now he understood why. Evelyn stepped out of the car, and Daniel followed. They walked into the house together, but the energy between them had changed. It was no longer built on assumption. It was grounded in truth. Daniel paused in the living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. I really thought I had everything figured out, he said quietly. Evelyn placed her keys down and turned to face him. That's the problem with thinking you know everything, she said. You stop learning. Daniel let out a small breath, almost a quiet laugh, but there was no humor in it. I underestimated you, he admitted. The words came naturally now. No resistance. No pride left to protect. Evelyn held his gaze. Yes, she said. You did. There was no anger in her voice. Just truth. And that truth carried more weight than anything else. Daniel nodded slowly. That won't happen again. Evelyn studied him for a moment, then spoke carefully. Make sure it doesn't. Not just with me. With anyone. Daniel understood what she meant. This was bigger than one mistake. Bigger than one moment. This was about how he saw people. How he judged them. How quickly he assumed he knew more than he actually did. This was karma. Not loud. Not dramatic. But precise. He had spoken with certainty, and life had answered with truth. He had dismissed someone who understood more than he ever realized, and now he had to face that reality. Daniel sat down slowly, his posture no longer confident, but grounded. I have a lot to learn, he said. Evelyn nodded. Yes, you do. She walked toward the hallway, then paused. And I'll teach you, she added. Daniel looked up, surprised. You will? Evelyn gave a small, knowing nod. That's what I've been doing all along. You just didn't see it. Daniel felt something shift again, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was clarity. Respect. Understanding. Thank you, he said. Evelyn didn't respond with words. She simply nodded and walked away. Daniel sat there for a moment longer, thinking about everything that had happened. The argument. The assumption. The truth. The lesson. He realized something important. This wasn't just about money. It never was. It was about respect. About patience. About knowing that silence doesn't mean weakness. Sometimes, it means strength waiting for the right moment. And that moment had come. If this story opened your eyes even a little, make sure you hit the subscribe button right now, like and share this with someone who needs this lesson, and drop a comment telling me which country you are watching from, because stories like this remind us that the truth always reveals itself when the time is right.